So how would you like a new Starcraft game? How would you like 4 Starcraft games? Because today we're going to talk about the rumored return of Starcraft, right? One of Blizzard's biggest franchises. And of course, it seems credible. We all remember how breathlessly excited Phil Spencer was about taking over the Activision Blizzard IPs. It seemed like they'd actually cook something. But so far, we've not really seen much in development. Like, there's been Game Pass ports, but not much else, not much solid. But now, a year and a half later, we're actually starting to see the first teases of what's going on with those franchises, especially Starcraft. And I wish I could tell you that I'm breathlessly excited. But I'm not! No. The monkey's paw always curls. Now, something you don't know about me is that I enjoy building things like this app front end, and that's why today's sponsor, boot.dev, is so relevant, because with Boot, you'll learn back-end web development using Python and Go. I've got a sick discount for you. Those are 2 excellent languages, and they will set you up well as a programmer. And why I love Boot, though, specifically is how it works, because it's basically a fantasy RPG. You've got quests, XP, public leaderboards. I mean, just look at the public leaderboard updating in real time as real users are doing lessons, and so much more, like the spell book, which is packed with programming reference material, but you unlock it as you progress in a natural way. It's so cool. And that's all because Boot's founder loves RPGs, actually a viewer of our channels, and that's why he's built it for people like us. And you'll learn real, practical programming skills, not just basics. That means portfolio projects, mastering Git, and what you'll actually need for a real job. And the best news is you'll get 25% off your first purchase at boot.dev/Bellular News, and it's zero risk. You can browse their content, do demos, and a lot more for free. And when you do buy, they're backed by a 30-day money-back guarantee. Before we hit the story that just broke, it's clear someone at Xbox remembered that Starcraft exists, right? Because earlier this year, we saw an entire Starcraft-themed expansion for Hearthstone, which was a little bit weird. Then, over the last few weeks, we've actually seen some neat things, like this announcement of a new official Starcraft game, which is in fact a licensed miniatures game from Archon Studios. Gotta be real though, it's maybe not the RTS I would want, but Starcraft minis? Hell yes, that's pretty awesome. At least it's like a flickering ember of activity for a series that has effectively been dormant for years, where Blizzard basically said, hey, we've literally put it on life support. But here's where today's story gets interesting. Starcraft 2 almost certainly will stay on life support, but Starcraft as a games franchise, well, very much apparently not. Here's what's just happened. Asia Today is exclusively reporting that 4 companies are bidding to get hold of the Starcraft license, and this is also that they can make new games as well as get global publishing rights for Starcraft. Now, it's not a sale of Starcraft as an IP. That would be extremely depressing, but what it is basically a license opportunity for Xbox and Blizzard, that somebody else can pay them for the license, agree to their terms for using that license, and then go and, well, make video games, with the company who has got the license being, of course, the people who accept all of the risks that are involved in making a new Starcraft game in 2025. Now, time for it to maybe get depressing, because the report claims 4 companies are in the running for the license, and those companies are NCSoft, Netmarble, Nexon, and Krafton. Now, of course, currently it's unclear whether these are the only companies who are pitching, or simply that they are the ones that this particular outlet was able to get information on. I suppose big picture it says, hey, Starcraft plus licensing appears to be a thing. Now, per Asia Today though, these bids are actually far enough along that they're fairly real. The companies have apparently pitched Blizzard at Blizzard's own campus. What's interesting is that all 4 companies also had aspects of their proposals leaked to Asia Today. So let's talk about our exciting new Starcraft games. NCSoft wants to make an RPG. Kinda makes sense. They do Lineage, Throne Liberty, they do Guild Wars. Maybe that could work. I'm suspicious. But then Netmarble wants to, well, make mobile games with, and I quote, deep gameplay. I love deep gameplay in a mobile game. I'm sure that's not monetized. Then Nexon claims that they've got a plan for a, quote, unique way to utilize the Starcraft IP, which, to be honest, sounds like a threat. And Krafton then say that they would leverage their existing development studios to make something new. Though whenever they were asked about this, they did deny. So Who knows? First up, though, it's worth pointing out that all of those companies are South Korean. That's generically interesting. It's also interesting because, well, StarCraft plus Korea, it's kind of a thing. Second, though, these are all companies deep in the live service game mines, right? They're full monetization, all the lovely dark retention techniques that are designed to get people hooked in and paying. That's what these companies do. And then third, none of them have got a history of making strategy games like this. That being said, well, if they're big South Korean companies with lots of South Korean developers, they probably have a few StarCraft players knocking about the place. I suppose the closest company with like competency here would probably be Netmarble, but that again would be restricted to mobile strategy games, which, again, I don't think we really want. Maybe it would be better than the Electronic Arts Command and Conquer mobile game. Anyway, what this seemingly means though is it's not StarCraft 3, and it's far more that IP being, well, slung about the place. Now, of course, right now, there is no hard confirmation that these licenses will be granted, right? Whether they'll be exclusive licenses or even that only one will be accepted. We can basically say from this that there are discussions that clearly something has changed, where they've maybe realized Blizzard Entertainment is not going to utilize StarCraft outside of the way that they are right now, which I'll get to in a little bit. Therefore, they may as well make money off that brand by licensing it about the place. Which does make a lot of sense, but can be kind of dangerous, especially if you give it to a bunch of companies who don't exactly have the best reputation when it comes to player experience. So I'll definitely say, don't get hyped, don't pre-order anything, and don't expect StarCraft 3 from them, but also don't expect it from Blizzard. But Blizzard are making a StarCraft game right now. I'll open with a quote from Jason Schreier. He said this when he was doing the press tour for his book, which is called Play Nice. The quote is, "Yes, they are working on a StarCraft shooter. Those are the facts. I've been able to independently verify that. I've talked to people who are sort of floating around that space, shall we say. Yes, it is true. They are making a StarCraft shooter. They've actually tried to do that multiple times. So it's a shooter. It's going to be led by Dan Hay, who is a producer on Far Cry. He moved over to Blizzard, and it represents the third time they've tried to make a StarCraft shooter project happen. Of course, the one before this was basically a Battlefield-like project, and, I love rubbing salt in the wound. Maybe pour in some vinegar as well. So just to make things sting even harder, that StarCraft Battlefield game, from what I heard, was goddamn sick. It was really cool. But do you know why they cancelled it? Because they needed Overwatch 2 and they needed Diablo 4. Big happy smiles. I'm very pleased. Anyway, we've even seen job listings at Blizzard for a open world shooter project. That was in November 2024. I think that does sort of line up with this. Now, to be clear, I'm fairly sure this game is still in a fairly early stage. It is true that they have got like tech and design work done from the prior like Battlefield style StarCraft shooter. I don't know if much of that will be able to transfer over. What I do know though is that Far Cry producer was part of a kind of like top echelon within the unannounced survival game. Obviously, that game, it was announced as an unannounced game, and then it was cancelled, and I suppose unannounced. Now, there were humongous job cuts on that team. What I do understand is that some of the top echelon of that team then moved over to do this new StarCraft project, which I, can't imagine feels particularly great to a lot of ex-Blizzard employees. Anyway, putting all of this together, we could totally see multiple StarCraft projects in development in time for the 30th anniversary of StarCraft, which would be in 2028. But I would say that absolutely nobody appears to be making a strategy game, let alone a sequel, not even Blizzard Entertainment. And here's the thing that really does hurt, and it hurts me especially. I love RTS. It's not hard to imagine why they wouldn't. The strategy game audience is harsh on sequels, and some of that's because games like StarCraft 1 and StarCraft 2 have shown us exactly what we like. That makes it hard to do a follow-up. As an example, Relic nearly collapsed after Dawn of War 3 and Company of Heroes 3. Hell, Dawn of War 2 put off so many people who liked Dawn of War 1. And just take a look at Blackbird Interactive with Homeworld 3. Yeah, getting the follow-up right, given all the constraints of budgets and timelines and companies randomly being dickheads, that seemed to hurt the strategy genre. In the indie sphere, then, there are spiritual successors, but they get a lot of flack. Maybe they're too similar to StarCraft. Maybe they're not different enough. Looking at Stormgate, there have been, consistently mixed reactions since launch. A lot of people, I would say, think that game came out too early into early access. They do really appear to be trying to get that right, but yeah, it's tough. Star 2 would always be a tough act to follow. So, with all that in mind, think about what happens when you try to make a sequel to StarCraft 1 and StarCraft 2. That's going to be hard. And even if you're Blizzard Entertainment, it's almost guaranteed to be a development without any of the talent involved in those original games. And those are games that require not only amazing design chops, amazing maths chops to actually balance them, but just some of that vibes, some of that understanding, intuition for the player that is so hard to get right in strategy games. And when you look at today's Blizzard Entertainment, you basically see StarCraft as an RTS is not worth them developing in their own opinion, yet they clearly understand StarCraft does have cut-through, does have brand recognition. Therefore, them doing some sort of big AAA shooter makes a lot of sense, while then also licensing it out so they can start to exploit the hell out of that IP. One of the big things of the Microsoft acquisition was the acquisition of IP. A lot of that IP was kind of hoarded within Blizzard, and one of the reasons was they'd had trouble when it came to external developments. Even the stuff with Blizzard North and Diablo was kind of tricky and fractured. There's obviously StarCraft Ghost. That was external development stuff that really didn't go that well. So ultimately, Blizzard Entertainment for years and years did not want to license out its IP. So many people with development teams and money would look at that Blizzard IP and think, I smell an opportunity. Now that Microsoft owns Blizzard, and therefore has the final say in that IP, well, there's opportunity. And purely in the business sense, it does make sense to find licensees. Blizzard does not have the capacity to make enough games to exploit all of their IP that is right now just sitting there unused. But that doesn't mean that it can't be used. It can be used via other companies. The bad version of this would be shitty mobile games. StarCraft turning into that absolutely ungodly disaster that was the Command & Conquer mobile game. But there is a company who's actually done big-scale licensing right, and that's Games Workshop with Warhammer. So maybe there is a world where, yes, we get StarCraft duds, but perhaps we also get the odd Space Marine. I would certainly not be against that, and it's not lost on me that StarCraft was, let's just say, somewhat inspired by Warhammer. But it's not just StarCraft. So in 2020, Activision refused to greenlight a Tony Hawk Pro Skater 3 and 4 remake from Vicarious Visions. Well, that was pretty sad, and the reason why is that those devs were more valuable to the company as Blizzard Albany, because, well, they showed that they could be useful in Diablo porting and on Call of Duty work, so they got thrown into those mines. But now, under Xbox, that Pro Skater remake is actually coming out. Just it's coming out a bit differently. It's from the remaster and porting team at Iron Galaxy, and it's being done as a third-party licensee. So they're actually beginning to use that IP. At PlayStation, Freedom Wars, Patapon, and Everybody Golf have all been remastered in the last few years. Sony still owns the trademarks in 2025, but they're not publishing those games. Instead, in every trailer you can see that they license them to Bandai Namco. And Bandai Namco are the people who got those things going. The point basically is that that company has then worked with the relevant devs to polish and port those things to PC, Switch, as well as PlayStation. And I have to assume that part of their licensing deal there was that things don't get to be on Xbox. I've got to imagine then that that's what Activision Blizzard will be doing here. And it ties into the trends we've been covering on this channel over the last while with outsourcing. Just in this case, it's on a wider corporate scale. So they're not asking, say, a random developer in the Philippines to churn out cosmetics under terrible conditions. It's just that these companies have simply got too much intellectual property and not enough developers. So you license the IP out, and there you go. You'll be able to get some returns. And guess what? The risk to you is low. They are the people who pay for that license, and if the game ends up being shit, well, you can say, it's kind of their fault. Because as much as with Warhammer we think about Space Marine, well, there's also the endless torrents of shovelware shite that came out under the Warhammer license. Just that Games Workshop were happy enough for so much Warhammer to occur that there would inevitably be good stuff that floats to the top, to the point where now Warhammer is almost a prestige brand within gaming. The question then is, will that happen to StarCraft? I guess I'll throw it to you. What sorts of StarCraft licensed games would you actually enjoy? I can think of several, and well, I have a perfect follow-up video, especially one that the lads at Netmarble should probably watch, because, well, the EU's targeting microtransactions in a way that will actually goddamn matter. hey, maybe this will be the microtransaction equivalent of the USB-C port that's sitting in my phone. Anyway, you can watch that video next.